Welcome to God with George Ortega. This is episode number 60, and I'm recording it on Thursday, January 14th, 2021 at 5:14 p.m. And I want to start off. I just attended a class, one of the local rabbis here in White Plains, and we're reading through a book, and there's a statement that said basically that whenever we talk with another person, um, we can receive wisdom in that way. And like what that made me think of is just this idea that whenever we listen to a person, talk with a person, hear their words, we're hearing the words of God. Um, and naturally we can always learn something by hearing the words of God, but it's it's a bit more complex than that because because the idea is like, yes, a lot of times we get a lot of valuable wisdom from listening to others, and again, and what's important about this is that it doesn't matter who it is. It could be, an extremely uneducated person, unintelligent by, general standards, whatever. I mean, like, we can learn so much from whoever it is, I mean, we learn from our pets, from our cats and dogs and all. So like the idea is the complication is like when we're learning from humans, what's interesting, and this is something that has to be kept in mind, is that well, God either has I don't know why God does this, but sometimes, when we hear the words of others, they may not be the wise or right thing for us to heed and, abide by, or they may not be the right answer to whatever. Um, and so that just has to be, it's just this element of God. Again, God is like every thought that comes, it's not just other people. All right, let's expand this. It's not just that everything that you ever heard from everyone that you have ever heard is really God speaking through them. It's not just that. It's that every thought that you have ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, really is God thinking and feeling through you. Which is like, that's one of the amazing and wonderful things about understanding. As we went through yesterday's during yesterday's episode 59, that God is everything. We are part of this everything that we call God, and God is continually manifesting God's will and God's, God's thoughts, just like through us, through other people, through everything. I mean, like if you walk through nature, that would be like a walk in the woods or something, like just you see a chipmunk running across the path or something. God communicates in a myriad of ways that are not literal, linguistic. you know the weather, I mean, like, the clouds, whatever. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to start with that. And what's interesting is, like, I thought about what I wanted to talk about today earlier, and I thought I had come up with something, but God, just made me forget, because she made me, want to just relate this, which I think was a very good thing. Again, sometimes God tells us things that we shouldn't heed. I think this was a particularly good thing to heed. But let me see if I can try to remember what. All right, yeah, a thought came to me earlier today, and I'm not sure this will, there's enough material for an entire episode on this, but you know, there is this, like, and this is, I think, maybe recent, in terms of our histories as a human species. A long time ago, whether thousands of years or whatever, people thought, well, this was the world. This planet Earth was the world. And, we Earthlings, human beings, and the other animals, we were the only life that existed, right? All right. So now, fast forward to modern science, astronomy. We know there's 2 or 3 trillion galaxies out there, each with 2 to 300 billion stars. And so you gotta know that there's other life out there. And actually, if you want to, like, I did this with a friend of mine some time ago. It's a kind of a good thing to open up people's minds in a kind of like a humorous way. You ask a person who might have conservative views on life, on the universe and all. You ask them, do you believe in aliens? Okay, and that's kind of like a loaded question for a lot of people. That's like, of course I don't believe in aliens. That's like fringe lunatic, stuff, whatever. So a lot of people will say no, laughably. And so, but then the next question that you ask them is kind of like the zinger, the intellectual zinger, whatever. Is like, then the next question is, oh, so you think that we, in this like 2 to 3 trillion galaxy, 2 to 300 billion stars per galaxy universe, you think that we're the only life in this universe? And at that point, they begin to reason, oh, yes, I guess. So, like, I think we here in the modern world, when it's framed within science and in that way, instead of like using the term aliens that's like loaded for a lot of people, um, we understand that we are not alone in this universe, and there's got to be, this this universe has got to be teeming with life. Some, some life perhaps are like on the level of single-celled organisms, very, um, not very advanced life. Other life would look on us, and pity us for our underdevelopment as a species. So other, I'm sure there's got to be like, planets someplace where like they're like, millions of years more advanced than us in their technology and their development as beings and all. And relating this to God, it's like, God is manifesting God's will, God's thoughts, because I guess I don't know what other aliens do. I would imagine they have thoughts. I don't know. But it's all God's consciousness being expressed through however many life forms there are. I want to stay with this because, like, again, God is everything. God is not just everything here on earth. God is everything in every star system and galaxy and in the entire universe. Um, Going back to the question of aliens, here's something else that's really cool. This thought came to me some long time ago, I guess. It was a very cool thought. It's this idea that, like, well, ordinarily we think of like aliens as like little green men, like from Mars or something, that they're about our size, which, it's kind of interesting because, like, why should they be, but anyway, so the thought that came to me was that it's possible, and I believe probable, because, like, there's a we're only we only interact with about 5% of the universe. The rest of it is dark matter, dark energy. We know it's out there, but we know very little about it. So, like, within this world of ours, like in your room, you will go out for a walk. I, w- I would I wouldn't be surprised if there were quote unquote alien life forms all around us that maybe, like, religion has termed angels and demons, spirits, maybe the dead souls, people have died and stuck around to like help us out or curse us, whatever, they've got different agendas. But that's, and the other part of that is, like, they may be all around us and they may be teeny little, beings. I think long time ago, I'm not sure I'll get this right, but I think the the Vatican or some popes, some clerics, some priests, I think it was, were debating how many angels could fit on the head of a pin, which is kind of like interesting because that, according to that conception, they apparently believed in tiny, tiny little aliens that they called angels, which is very cool. All right. So yeah. And and again, so we're trying to better understand the nature of God. And so it could be that, just like, for example, you talk with someone, you listen to someone, and someone's imparting information that's coming through them to you from God. Um, it could be that, like, you're having thoughts all the time, and I said earlier that these thoughts are all from God, right? But it could be that these thoughts are coming indirectly, not from other people, but from these life forms, that we might call aliens or spirits, or souls that continue to hang around. Um, and that's and so that if you see it that way, that maybe kind of better explains why some thoughts you might want to question whether they're wise, or right to listen to. you know um that reminds me of something. Yeah, I read a book on shamanism a while back. This guy, who would, apparently, through meditation or something, enter a realm where he was communicating with, spirits. I don't know. And he would, like, he commented in the book, but a lot of these spirits, are pranksters. They will tell you stuff. They'll mess with you. Just like sometimes we mess with each other. you know. So that, that's an interesting. So God has. So yes, everything comes from God, but even, with that, you can't take it at face value that it comes from God. And so, like, it's something that you should completely heed or whatever. All right. But yeah, it's yeah. So right, God is everything. God is, and these animals, I guess, cats and dogs, who we consider not very bright by our, um, standards. They're probably looking at us, and they're probably think we're all idiots, whatever. Because, like, they may be, like, on a level where they're perceiving things not in terms of these, like, rational, logical thoughts that we tend to take a lot of pride in, but on levels that are communicated from God, again, also because, like, a cat or a dog is manifesting God's will. Um, in a language that's not, that's, like, more intuitive, I guess, right? And I wouldn't doubt. I mean, it could. And the other part of this, now we get into, like, quantum physics. We've got about 14 minutes, because this is cool. This is interesting. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon known as quantum entanglement. And that's when two particles become entangled, where, let's say, they have certain attributes. Like, one of the attributes in physics is called spin, and I'm not really sure what it means, but, like, you can have either uh, an upspin or a downspin, right? Of this, so, like, of a particle. So let's say you've got two entangled particles, and one of them has an upspin, right? And you, by some kind of, like, technology, change that upspin, and, all right, that one will have an upspin. The entangled one will have a downspin. They're corresponding. And so what happens is, you by some kind of mechanism, you can use this with polarization as a better example. So polarization, right or left, up or down, whatever. But, like, with spin, it's the same thing. So, like, you've got, if you change the spin of one particle from up to down, then the spin of the entangled particle will change from down to up. Not in all cases, which is interesting. In most cases, I think. But what's really cool about this also, because this is right now I'm explaining it. Let's say the particles are 3 feet apart or 3 yards apart or whatever. But in theory, if you've got two entangled particles, one could be at one end of the universe and the other at the other end, and that's kind of like a nebulous kind of like thing, because like, an infinite universe, I'm not sure it has an end, but maybe the observable universe, whatever. So anyway, you have two entangled particles at opposite ends of the universe, and they communicate in this way through a mechanism that's thousands of times faster than the speed of light. Um, Ordinary reality, matter, apparently, because there's a law in physics that says that nothing can travel. Actually, it's a no. I got to explain this. I don't know why I'm getting to this, but all right. There's a law of physics that says nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. That's not entirely correct. The correct statement is nothing can accelerate from below the speed of light to above the speed of light. Okay? So that doesn't preclude or exclude something continuously traveling much, much faster than the speed of light, never descending below the speed of light or ascending above it from below. So anyway, look, I'm saying all this to kind of like to suggest that, like, we're back to the animals, the cats and dogs. They make us feel better. They're probably scoping us out. This guy's coming in all worried and anxious and stuff again. And like, I, it could be that through kinds of a kind of like a communicative mechanism that science is far from understanding, that they're communicating with us, and maybe we're communicating with them. So, and again, like tying this back to God, God uses so many different ways of communicating with us, which is so cool. Um, okay. I had some other thoughts about God because, like, I'm so glad I'm doing this because I really, the point of this is not just to help you understand God better and communicate with God to get closer to God, but for me too. I mean, I've read a lot of religion. I know a lot of stuff in terms of like theology, but it's one thing to know these things, and a lot of times religion doesn't really get into like the attributes of God and stuff. Like I just got a book. A friend of mine referred me to it. It's called How to Think About God. Mortimer Adler. He wrote it, I think, in the 60s, 70s. I got to check it out. But but yes, this series is kind of like it forces me to think about God because, like, yes, my personal one of my personal goals in doing, another personal goal is just like to help you think about God also, understand God better. But for myself, to you know, to to go beyond what I've read, to go beyond what I know, to ask questions that perhaps don't seem to have answers, that are unanswerable perhaps. But to understand God more completely, in order to be closer to God. So, and it's working. It's working. I mean, like it's working now. Like I was working with my co-host, for about 50 episodes, and again, we had some philosophical differences where we decided that I would continue doing the show on my own. Basically, he just like doesn't he doesn't believe that the God concept is useful anymore because has so much historical baggage. And to be honest, I mean, he may be right. It's a judgment call, but but you know but so like for the last like 10 episodes I've been doing it on my own, and it really it's a great exercise in kind of like in forcing oneself to confront God, and this isn't like praying to God. It's interesting. There's a kind of like statement that when you pray to God, you're talking to God, and when you meditate, you're listening to God. All right, so what we're doing now is to a great extent talking. We're not listening to God per se. I mean, we always are because God's always talking through us. And we're not talking to God per se. I'm talking to you and I'm talking to myself. But we're talking about God. Okay. And I think that's important. I think because like, we've got this like, part of the evolution of humans is like to gain a better and better and better understanding of God. Because again, most fundamentally, we are God. We're just like a molecule of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean is Pacific or Atlantic Ocean. It's just not the whole thing. It's just like us. This is an immense universe, again, 2 to 3 trillion galaxies that is God. It makes sense of God is everything, God is the universe, and we're part of this everything. We're just not the part that gets to decide anything, like everything else. Like, and actually, all right. So like and this gets back, I'll go over this over and over because it's very important to understand that like we're only just ever manifesting the will of God. To say it in a way that people don't like to hear that much, but I think, it's important to say it's like we don't really have a free will. We have a God's will. We express and manifest God's will. Um, so so then, all right, the question that just came to mind is, all right, if we're just expressing God's will, and if all those other aliens out there and, across the universe are also just expressing God's will, and if the rocks and the forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, these chemical laws, if everything is obeying God's wills through natural law or whatever, um, the question arises, well, where is the part of God, of the universe, of everything that is controlling everything? And as I'm thinking about it, what's coming to mind, it may or may not be accurate or correct, but what's coming to mind is it may be that, well, the controlling part of, and yes, this actually makes sense. I think I may have had this thought before. The controlling part of everything may be everywhere. In other words, like the laws of nature control everything. So if the laws of nature control everything, the laws of nature have to be everywhere in order to control everything. So like again, so if we define the laws of nature as God's will, then God's will has to be everywhere. So it's not like God is way out there just governing things like a puppeteer, like we're dangling on strings, whatever. It's like God is infused in every atom, every quark of reality, controlling things at that level. Um, and that actually, in this class with the rabbi, we were talking about spontaneous remission of diseases and the placebo effect. And yes, that probably explains it. We have no idea, this placebo effect, it's powerful. It's like, it's across, it's been demonstrated in so many ways. Things that you wouldn't believe could be cured or fixed in the human body, miraculously repair themselves, and they don't understand it. So, but this, seeing it from this perspective, you can see that yes, it's God manifesting in every cell of our bodies, in every, you know, particle in every cell, every nucleus, every, everything. So, all right, we've got less than 4 minutes. I don't know what else God wants me to tell you right now. But I think I've enjoyed this show. Some like a couple of shows ago, I was like struggling with it because like God wasn't feeding me good material. I rely on God. God is like my writer. It's like, people have, some people with TV shows, it's indirect as God makes the writers do the, write the material. With this one, it's coming directly from God. And so it's not written down anywhere. So got to rely on how God's feeling, whether he wants, sometimes. All right. So 3 minutes. All right. Yeah, I want to finish up with just this more open-ended idea that you want to get closer to God, talk about God, do the exact same thing that I'm doing with your friends, or with yourself, whatever, ask these questions, try to figure out the nature of God logically, use logic. I mean, like sometimes intuition is helpful, you know, but with logic, you can reason it out and come back to it and repeat it, replicate it. It's kind of like, it's a tool. Um, and yeah, because like it's not, it doesn't seem to be enough to to believe that God exists, or it is enough for a lot of people, but I think it's better. I think it's more powerful to understand that God exists rather than just believe it. And more powerful than that, I think, is to better understand the nature of God. I mean, I'm just guessing, it could be that, it's too much knowledge, but I think that the better we understand God, the more evolved we are as individuals, the more actualized, perhaps the more enlightened, perhaps the more virtuous. It could be that being very virtuous is dependent on this knowledge of God to a great, or no, there's a lot of people who don't believe in God, who are atheists, for example, who are very virtuous, but some forms of virtue, perhaps some degrees of virtue, perhaps require or are aided by greater knowledge of God. All right, it's about a minute left, and God's telling me to end this episode. So watch this every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on channel 76 on White Plains Community Media, 76 if you get Optimum, 45 if you get Verizon. And right after this episode, I'm feeling pretty energetic. So like I keep on talking about it, like I'm gonna upload the episodes to YouTube. I'm gonna upload, maybe like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different episodes that haven't been up there. That's what I'm going to do after this. I hope you're having a good day. And so it's Thursday. This is like for Friday. So I'm not going to be recording another episode until Sunday, probably, that you'll see on Monday. So until then, you know, um, again, you hope, try this out. Now, talk to somebody about God and see what you come up with. Don't rely on what the Bible says. Just think things through and see what happens. All right. Thanks for watching, and God willing, I will see you soon.